Hey YouTube, Joyboy here. So, let's talk about Donquixote Doflamingo. And so guys, this video is going to be really different, I think. A question that I don't think a lot of people ask because the obvious answer here wouldn't warrant much discussion. But I want to talk about it anyway, and while doing so I think it's prudent to discuss who Doflamingo is. But we'll start off with Mihawk's quote to Luffy during the Marineford War. "It's not a devil fruit or a cheap trick. One by one he turns the people around him into his allies. More than anyone else sailing across the seas, that man possesses the most terrifying power. The facts at hand is that Luffy turns an absurd number of villains into his allies. Luffy has some kind of mysterious ability which allows him to change the hearts of those around him. Luffy just makes people gravitate towards him, or circumstances themselves will alliances to form. You can even look at the Strat crew for examples of this. People like Frankie, people like Robin, didn't start off as friends. Looking at Luffy's allies, people like Boa Hancock initially tried to kill him. Many members of the Strat Grand Fleet at the beginning did not look at Luffy as an ally, did not look at him as a friend. He was just another pirate. But by the end of Dressrosa, they're willing to swear their loyalty to him. I think the strongest change of heart here was with Cavendish. Cavendish above anyone else who wanted Luffy dead. I think this also applies to Luffy's rivals as well. Certainly, I wouldn't consider Buggy a friend of Luffy, but the events in Impel Down and Marineford made Buggy into an ally, at least temporarily. Someone like Law, a fellow supernova. I think many people think and agree that by the end of the story, Law will be a friend. Looking at Whole Cake Island right now, someone like Capone, also another supernova, again, wouldn't really put Capone on friendship tier, but still Luffy managed to make him into an ally, for however long that lasts. But I think that the most baffling examples of Luffy using his most terrifying power involve the characters that were central antagonists to their arc. Characters who had some kind of dream, goal, aspiration, and Luffy crushed that. Yet still they ended up becoming an ally. Or in some cases it seems likely that they will in the future. Again, here you could probably mention Buggy and Boa Hancock. You could probably also throw Bellamy in here. But I think that the most profound example is Crocodile. Crocodile, who helped Luffy and the Whitebeard pirates during the Marineford War. If you had told me during or shortly after Alabasta, that this character Crocodile would end up helping Luffy in any facet in the future, I would not have believed you. Everything that Crocodile wanted in this world, Luffy took away from him. There should have been nothing but bad blood between the two. Yet, when we see Crocodile again, in Impel Down, he says specifically that he's not holding any grudges against Luffy. In fact, these are the same words reiterated by Bellamy. And when it comes to speculations and the motives of characters that Luffy has already defeated into the future, characters like Gekko Moria. Gekko Moria really stands out as a potential ally in the future. A lot of people speculate that Gekko Moria might play some role in the Wano Kuni arc against Kaido. Moria has history with Kaido. Moria's also been to Wano before because he ended up robbing the grave of Ryuma. We know per Doflamingo that his attempt to kill Moria failed. Doflamingo reports that Moria just simply disappeared. We know that Absalom, who has the invisibility devil fruit, by touching things can make other things invisible. We also know that he's active in the New World as a reporter taking secret photos. So it seems likely that Moria is going to reappear in the story, and if he does, the circumstances would warrant some kind of alliance, in my opinion. Basically, an argument can be made for most characters to eventually become some kind of ally for Luffy, and I think the whole purpose of this is for Oda to set up, towards the end of the story, the greatest pirate alliance in the history of the world. And in my opinion, this alliance will be used in order to take down the world government. And the leader of this pirate alliance would be Luffy, bringing together the entire divided pirate world. But I'm not saying that everyone has to become Luffy's ally. It's way too early to call this for sure. There's certain characters which it's hard to rationalize them ever becoming an ally, like Crocodile before. And one of these characters is Donquixote Doflamingo. Luffy did manage to defeat Doflamingo, and Doflamingo is currently heading towards Impel Down. But I think that there's quite a few people that believe, and I'm part of this group, that Doflamingo's role in the story isn't complete. We will see him again at some time or another. So as we know, Jack failed to rescue him, but the way that it'll work, in my opinion, based on what we know right now, is we know that Bon Clay is in Impel Down. He's sort of replaced Ivankov as the Queen of New Kama Land in level 5.5 of Impel Down. And so going back to the idea that all of the allies that Luffy has gained throughout the course of his journey are going to help him in the future of the story, particularly maybe in the final battle, I think of course Bon Clay has to be there. Bon Clay's not going to just spend the rest of his life in Impel Down. That doesn't make any sense. So at some point, Bon Clay is going to break out of Impel Down, or someone will break him out. Something will happen to that effect. If Doflamingo right now is heading towards Impel Down, if that's where he's going, and if Bon Clay at some point in time is going to break out, I think it's very possible that Doflamingo breaks out with him, so that Doflamingo can do something in the future of the story. And as a side note to this, there's other characters as well that for the most part have not been emphasized since Luffy defeated them, but they might also play a role in a similar way. Someone like Arlong, who is also in Impel Down, could reappear and actually play a role. And I think it would be really fitting for him to. I think more than anyone else, Arlong, if he shows a change of heart, would be really powerful for the Fishman people. But I imagine at this point in time, a lot of people have caught on to where I'm going with this, and they're thinking to themselves, is Joy Boy really going to argue Doflamingo being an ally in the future of this story? Like, I understand that it's a meme that Joy Boy makes all enemies into some kind of ally, but this is just way too far, bro. In before the Luffy and Kaido alliance, am I right? But no, I actually think that there's something worthy of discussing here. If Doflamingo reappears, could he be an ally? Remember that an ally does not mean that they are friends. In fact, they can still be enemies and be allies. An alliance's purpose, more than anything else, is a common objective. Both these two characters want the same thing and can best obtain it by working together, i.e. what is happening right now between Capone and Luffy. And so what is it that Doflamingo really wants? And how could this relate to what Luffy might do in the future? Who is Doflamingo? And so we'll start off in his flashback. Doflamingo was born a celestial dragon. He lived in Revujo. And by everything that we can see, he loved it. He loved being the king. He loved telling people what to do. He loved the freedom that this provided him. But looking at it from another perspective, it may not be that he loved this per se, it might be all he ever knew. Being a celestial dragon, raised as a celestial dragon, given the privileges of a celestial dragon, he acted like a celestial dragon. He was taught that celestial dragons are the greatest beings that exist. Therefore, he believed it. Imagine the shock when everything that you hold true comes crumbling down upon you. That is essentially what happened to Doflamingo. His father, Homing, left Revujo, abandoned his title as a celestial dragon to go live with the commoners of the north, the regular humans. And when the people found out that celestial dragons were living among them, they sought revenge for the many centuries of persecution that had been handed to them by the celestial dragons. For the first time in his entire life, Doflamingo felt thirst, he felt hunger, he felt pain, and most probably he didn't feel like an omnipotent being. Corazon states that Doflamingo had been unhinged since he was very young, and this is most likely true. But asking a simple question such as, did Doflamingo love his family? It's not an easy one to answer. I don't believe it's as obvious as you may think it is. I really do think that Doflamingo loved his family. Speaking of Corazon, Doflamingo killed Corazon, so obviously that means that Doflamingo didn't care for him. But at the same time, we have evidence and details which would suggest that Doflamingo would have done anything for Corazon. Stated specifically to Law, after he killed Corazon, he fell into a depression. Maybe Doflamingo had to kill Corazon, because Corazon was a traitor. but the actual act of killing him offered no satisfaction. In fact, it may have actually disturbed him. Going back to Doflamingo's family and his parents, Doflamingo's mother died of a sickness when he was just 8, and then 2 years later he took his own father's life. And so we can think of Doflamingo as killing his father out of rage, out of anger for the circumstances that were created because of his decisions. That definitely makes sense. But you could also think about it from another perspective. Corazon, Dofi, and Homewing's life were screwed. No matter where they went, the humans would surely hate them. There'd be no way that they could survive like this. Maybe the only hope that Doflamingo found was in killing his father and bringing his head to MavisHdz, to perhaps protect him and his brother. Maybe Doflamingo made a hard choice. Or maybe he attempted to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Maybe he viewed his father as a traitor, just like Corazon. Maybe he believed his father put his own interests above the interests of the family and endangered them. Maybe he believed Homing killed his mother, and so his actions deserved death. We'll never know for sure. But speaking of family, one thing that is consistent with Doflamingo and his character throughout Dressrosa is that family seems to be important to him. But it's not the family that is related by blood, but the family created. One thing that was sprinkled throughout Dressrosa is little instances, little scenarios, where Doflamingo almost seems human. Law tries to paint him as cruel and heartless, but the way that he actually acts towards his family seems really redeeming. No matter how many times they screw up, Doflamingo always forgives them. Sometimes he blames himself and the orders that he gave them, and sometimes he simply blames fate. We can't go back and change what's already occurred. But you know, Doflamingo is a man whose thoughts are difficult to grasp, and maybe this is part of the chaos that Corazon alluded to. Maybe you really can't understand and predict insanity, while being willing to do anything for his family, forgiving them at every possible moment, and showing what can only be described as love for them. You have incidents like what occurred with Monet, where Doflamingo insisted upon her essentially accomplishing her objective by killing herself and Virgo. If you loved someone, how could you ask them to kill themselves? But you know, there's a part of me that thinks that maybe Doflamingo's objective, and perhaps the objective of everyone on his crew, is greater than anyone individually. The consequences of the Strats and Law taking Caesar meant the sure demise of the Donquixote Doflamingo pirates. It was basically stated outright that without Caesar, Kaido would be going after Doflamingo. And Kaido is not very forgiving. Maybe Doflamingo believed that the smartest plan here was to have Monet sacrifice herself in Virgo to preserve everyone else. You know, I think it's really interesting that Doflamingo literally laughs in the face of everyone. He is scared of no one except for Kaido. Literally, Corazon, the previous admiral, Doflamingo boasts in his face. But upon hearing that he might earn the anger of Kaido, true terror. Why is this? Well, some might say that Doflamingo is afraid of Kaido, the one man that Doflamingo is afraid of. But you know, I don't think that it's because Kaido could kill Doflamingo. Because I don't believe that Doflamingo is a person that is afraid of death. If you look at Law, in his backstory, Doflamingo and everyone else describes young Law as a young Doflamingo. Law stated himself that he wasn't afraid of death. I think the same applies to Doflamingo. So what is Doflamingo actually scared of? Well, if you look at Moria's backstory about how Kaido killed his entire crew, maybe this is the reason. If Doflamingo ends up losing to a Marine Admiral, perhaps his entire crew gets arrested, but they won't die. But if you inspire the anger of Kaido, you and everyone else that you hold dear, your family, are all dead. But let's go back to Doflamingo and his crew's actual objective. Maybe their lives individually don't matter to Doflamingo, it's the objective itself. One thing that I think is really interesting, and I think that there's a lot of clues which substantiate this, is that the people that Doflamingo actively recruits into his crew, makes his family, are the people that this world has broken. And I think that Doflamingo can relate to this because the world broke him. You ever think to yourself, why didn't Doflamingo let Bellamy become part of the Doflamingo Pirates? Why was it so much harder for Bellamy than it was for Law? And I think the reason is simple. Bellamy wasn't broken, and Law was the most broken person Doflamingo had come across, aside from himself. Broken and twisted into a typhoon of anger. Another thing that Doflamingo told Bellamy really intrigues me, which is Doflamingo says, specifically, that your objective and my objective have never been the same. If you recall, Bellamy initially was the kind of pirate who believed in materialistic gains and scoffed at idealistic dreams. He may have looked up to Doflamingo, but he was nothing like Doflamingo. Doflamingo is broken, and he collected the broken. You remember Senor Pink's backstory? Baby 5, the woman who just wants to make somebody happy. It's stated in an SBS that essentially Doflamingo saved Monet and her sister Sugar from, quote, very unfortunate circumstances, end quote. I think that Doflamingo was actually idealistic, but not idealistic in the kinds of ways that our heroes are. He saw this world destroy people. It destroyed him. The people who attempted to hurt him were destroyed by it. The people that he saved were also broken. Maybe this world was to blame. And maybe by seeking its destruction, you can offer a reprieve from the hurt. One of the most curious scenes with Doflamingo occurred in Law's flashback. The first curiosity is when Law reveals that he is from Fleavance, the White City, which had succumbed to amber-lead sickness, or amber-lead poisoning. Certain members of the Doflamingo Pirates reacted to this as the rumors had told them that this sickness was contagious. But the person who spoke up for Law was Doflamingo himself. It actually angered him that they spread these rumors, because the truth was it wasn't contagious. The fact that Doflamingo knew this, and the spreading of these lies bothered him, kind of makes you reevaluate how you understand Doflamingo himself. And another scene is equally as baffling. We see Doflamingo, previously having been reading a book about Fleavance, fall asleep. And when he wakes up, he's visibly disturbed, as though falling asleep to this book reminds him of his own unfortunate circumstances, all the pain that he went through. It really makes you wonder, does Doflamingo care? It makes it seem as though he did, but the way that he shows it is just different to how we would expect it to be. Even when Law calls him heartless to his face, Doflamingo laughs. "I'm not heartless." A quote from Law really sticks out to me. When Law tried to join the Doflamingo Pirates initially, he stated that he no longer believed in anything. I think it's easy to guess that maybe Doflamingo acquired these kinds of people so that he could use them. But maybe, seeing what the world had done to them, seeing that they no longer believed in anything, Doflamingo wanted to give them purpose. Give them a reason to exist. A reason for their suffering. And maybe this reason was to aid Doflamingo in his plans to destroy the parts of the world which aimed to destroy them. There's a lot of gaps missing in Doflamingo's story, but I think that if you want to point at a culprit for all of the problems that Doflamingo experienced in his life, the cause of all his suffering, it's the Celestial Dragons and the world government. Just the same as the Celestial Dragons and the world government destroyed Fleavance and broke Law, the way that the Celestial Dragons acted and their history caused all of the Doflamingo family to suffer. If it weren't for this, even though Homing abandoned his title as a Celestial Dragon, they wouldn't have experienced what they did. And even on top of this, after Doflamingo did basically what he thought that he needed to in order to go back, they rejected him. It's really hard to tell the extent, but it's very clear that Doflamingo does, at least in part, blame the Celestial Dragons. He said this verbatim: "I swore that I would destroy every last part of this world that they control." So going back to the initial premise of the video, that Luffy ends up turning those around him into his allies. We know that at some point in time in the future of the story, Luffy will clash against the world government, the world nobles, and I think that in this way, him and Doflamingo share common ground. They both want the same objective. So maybe being allies isn't as far-fetched as it may sound. But anyway guys, there's a lot more I could have said, but we're gonna go ahead and call it good here. I want you guys to keep in mind that when it comes to Doflamingo, he's incredibly complex, and there's always more that you could potentially say. One aspect that I kind of cut from this video because it isn't really relevant to where I wanted to go is the fact that Doflamingo also seems like he wants to be king. He wants to rule over people. He stated specifically that he hates more than anything else being looked down upon. And I also think that this is an important aspect of his character. But the purpose here is to, in some parts, better explain Doflamingo. Attempt to redeem him in whatever small way that I can, in order to justify perhaps a change of role in the future of the story. Maybe he will work together with Luffy. But as always guys, let me know what you think. Let me know if you agree or disagree and why. Just share your thoughts. Like the video if you like the video, dislike the video if you dislike the video. Make sure to subscribe if you want to be notified for my future content. And as always guys, have a wonderful day.